What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Barracks Bros podcast. My name's Justin. This is,
Jeremiah.
and we are bringing a controversial one, which I don't know why, but this is probably gonna be a hot topic, and we're probably gonna
Yeah.
get some backlash from the few people that watch our videos. This
Hey,
episode,
which is good because ultimately it's like, look, we're not going to be 100% right, but
yeah,
the discussions need to happen and truth comes out when we bring it to light. So if
yes,
anybody disagrees, feel free to leave a comment, make a video, flame us, bring it.
yeah, whatever you want to do, and we're open to us being wrong about things, and we're open to dialogue. We want to talk with people. That's the whole point of this is we want Christian men to get back out there and start doing what Christ called us to do. So today we are going to talk about red pill. Now,
Yeah.
this is one that Jeremiah and I have kind of talked about off camera, and it's something that both of us kind of dove into a little bit while we were in the military.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about red pill. We're going to talk about what it is, what they believe, the problems with it, the problem with society, and the problem that it's having with the Christian worldview. So, Jeremiah, you're a lot more uh, knowledgeable
I
whenever it
went
comes to
I
that.
went pretty deep into the rabbit hole back in the day.
Yeah,
And I think it's like, how did I get into it originally? And it was back in high school. So my parents got divorced, right? And I started to become a bit cynical on my view of relationships and whatnot. It feels like your kind of idea of like, oh, because you think your parents are going to be together forever. It's like you think when you grow up, you're going to find that relationship. And I was always, when I was young, I was very shy, very introverted. I never talked to chicks at all, and I guess I was pretty insecure. So what did I do? I went online and I was like, oh, how do I get chicks, right? And you start seeing the pickup artists, and then you start finding other guys. And eventually I stumbled onto the red pill. Uh, and Rollo Tomasi and his book, The Rational Male. And I remember when I was in high school, I bought his book and I started reading it, and I was like, wow, this is like this knowledge, and I can use this. And because some of it is, I would say, like pretty good advice for men. Like some of it does kind of give you a pretty decent idea of how you know dating and relationships works with women. However, there are massive, I would say, problems that have came out of the red pill community regarding especially prescriptions of like what a lot of the red pill YouTubers and the people out there are starting to push. Uh, so it's like they diagnose some of the problems, I would say, relatively correctly, but at the same time, they also tend to overgeneralize and uh, make claims that are not necessarily true, and frankly, a lot of claims and that are just frankly immoral, and that we're not designed to live in this way. So yeah, the red pill, and yeah, so let's talk about it a little bit. So like a lot of the red pill stems from this idea of female hypergamy, right? Like the idea that women tend to date upwards in the dominance hierarchy. They want to find men who are of higher status, who make money, who are more attractive, right? So in the red pill, what is the response to hypergamy? It's like, well, you should understand this, and then as a man, you should focus on self-improvement, right? Like going to the gym, making money, uh, increasing your value, which is honestly not bad advice. That's good advice for young men, right? Like put your head down, work hard. Like you're wondering why you're not successful. It's like, yeah, start taking action. Uh, Indeed.
well,
But go
it's
ahead.
well. I was just gonna say it really feeds off of the struggles that men are going through. Like
Exactly.
It's all it's all an it's all an attempt to basically, just like anything else. Whenever you look at any type of advertisement for anything, they're feeding
Yep.
off of the misfortune of other people's situations, and that's essentially what's going on. And we're going to dig into some of this more, but like when we look at what the culture is nowadays, it's just a hookup culture. Like there's no morals, there's no values at all in anything. Like it's just young people today, especially. It's your status comes from how for men at least, your
Yep.
status comes from how strong you look, right? Um, how how you dress and how many women you're hooking up with on a regular basis. And that's kind of what Red Pill thrives on, is telling men, hey, you need to look good, you need to be in shape, and you need to sleep around with a bunch of women, and then you'll be successful. You also need to make a bunch of money, and
Hey, so,
this is we're trying to bring awareness to the problems of this, especially for not just Christian men, but Christian women also, because I think what we're seeing is we're seeing the effects of society. We talked about in prior episodes about how this is a hypersexualized culture. Everything is
yep.
about sex, sex, sex. Um, and if you can't see that, you're really blinded by a lot of the things of this world. Um, and unfortunately, we are not addressing these things, these real world problems in the church. This is all the devil's schemes, just slapped with a different label on it. And we're not talking about it in the church. So whenever our young people go out into the world, they're at a disadvantage because they're not studying scripture. Like they may go to Bible studies and stuff, but they're not talking about the world problems that are going on. And
Dude,
it's just becoming a problem.
and I think with the church, right? Like I think a lot of the problem now is that, you know, like men, you grow up and you don't like there's not enough good role models available for men. In the church, a lot of churches have become feminized. And
Yeah.
so you when you grow up, you feel like, you look at the church and it really depends on where you go. This is not true of all churches, but like from my personal experience, it's like you see a lot of guys and you know that don't have that I would say like masculine edge. You see a lot of The Simpsons. What's the name of that? The neighbor, Ned?
Oh
Uh
yeah.
yeah, like a lot of guys like that. So you think, oh, so that's what being a Christian man is. It's like just being, you know, hey, how you doing, buddy? What's going on? You
Yeah.
know? Uh, and look, nothing wrong with those guys. A lot of great men there. Uh, however, it's like people often think like being a Christian as a man, it's like you can't fully embrace your masculine side. That's just absolutely not true. That's more of a
Yeah.
problem with modernism and how everything is developed than it is with Christianity, because Christianity is the most masculine religion out there. Read the Bible. So many badass men. Look through church history. So essentially it's like we have done a poor job of having male role models on like what it is to be a man in general life. So then when men get older, they start looking elsewhere online to be like, okay, what kind of guy should I be? And where do they end up? They find some guy on YouTube who looks jacked, who's sleeping with a lot of chicks, who's selling him this lifestyle as the ultimate end to being a man, right? You want to be an alpha male, not a beta male, right? And what does an alpha male do? An alpha male makes a lot of money, works, is super jacked and ripped on steroids. Most of these guys,
Right.
let's be
Yeah.
honest, and
Yeah.
uh, and is
Genius.
sleeping around a lot. But I would say that's not a man. That's a man who lacks virtue, who lacks self control.
Yeah.
Uh, because as men, you know, we should want what is best for the people around us,
Yeah.
and we should be pillars of our community uh, in terms of doing good, not just focused on ourselves and the benefits that we can get from life, right? Which is nice cars, pretty women, right? That's a small part of life. A lot of that is meaningless, hedonistic nonsense. But that's what we're being sold as what it is to be the best man. That's in the modern society, and that's just not true. And yeah, so anyways, like regarding the red pill, right? So like there's some good advice in there because it is true. The world is a pretty rough place for a young dude, especially when you start dating. You know, things aren't the way that they used to be. You go on dating apps, it's a nightmare. You're in public, you see uh, the quality of women around at the clubs and the bars, and it doesn't feel good, and you feel like you have to be a clown to get the attention of women. You have to operate as like, in this super high level game to like figure out the dynamics so that you can make this work. Uh, right. But so the truth, so there is a problem that the red pill does seek to address, and they do make some good points regarding it. However, the prescriptions are ultimately making this problem that we're trying to address worse, and that's the main point here. Is
Yes.
that like we're anti-feminist? The red pill is anti-feminism. However, the way that most uh, the way that guys are operating, uh, especially the ones that subscribe to the red pill, are only fueling the fire. They're only making
Yes.
the decline worse. So the question is like, what do we replace? What do we replace it with? It's like, okay, then what should we do about it? The red pill is trying to address this problem. Ultimately, I think it's only making it worse. And the truth is, it's a return to tradition. It's a return to virtue, right? To God. Because when we make an idol out of the world, when we make an idol out of being, a high status guy, of making a lot of money, of the gym, of women, of just getting women, like that's our only goal in life. It leads to destruction and it creates dysfunction. It's not a healthy way to live.
Well, something that I always go back to, and this is one of the things that really changed my perspective. Obviously, whenever I started uh, getting back in church and studying scripture, I started seeing the things that God calls sin, and it was all the things that the red pill really pushes.
Yeah,
And but Solomon, King Solomon, he talks about uh, he talks about in the Old Testament. He says that all is vanity. Now we're talking about King Solomon here. King Solomon literally had everything, and this is, if you guys want to go read about this, where he says all is vanity. He's talking. This is in out of Ecclesiastes. Little background on King Solomon. He's the son of David. He's the only king of Israel that didn't have a war during his time as king. Um, he was he was so favored by God that uh, God told him he could have anything that he wants, and he chose wisdom. Uh, but Solomon had the money. He had all of the women. He was a king. Everything that you could imagine that you would want in this life, he had it all. All of the drugs, all of the alcohol. He tried it all, and what he came up with was that he was never satisfied, and it all led to more problems than what he started out with. And that's the same exact thing with this red pill stuff. You can't jump outside of God's order and run
yeah,
through this life and expect for good things to happen. Will there be up times at times whenever you're doing opposite stuff of God? Yes. There'll be times where he'll let you go so far and then he's just going to drop you straight from out of the bottom of it. Like it's going to happen. And so, we were talking earlier. I heard this from a guy. Actually, I think it was from Ruslan because I listened
mm,
to him a little bit. He
yeah,
said uh, that red pill brings up the right problems but provides the wrong solution. Um,
exactly,
it tells you the problems that are going on, and they're legitimate problems that are going on.
absolutely,
But its solution is more sin, which makes no sense. We talked about feminism. The feminism that we see nowadays is not the feminism back in the day. The feminism back then, I'm not going to lie, they had legitimate arguments. Like they had legitimate things. We look at Christianity. One of the things that made Christianity such a turnoff to the pagan world at the time was that in Christianity, women had rights. Like they were seen as equals. They had a different role. Just because you have a different role doesn't mean you're not equal. But they were seen as equals. They were seen as children of God. And back in the early church, the Romans used to mock Christianity and say that it was the religion of the women, um, or of women. So whenever we look at what Christianity provides versus what the world's providing sexual immorality and the confusion of gender roles, where Christianity provides morality, uh, uprightness with God, and no confusion when it comes to the things that God has plainly ordered. And when we live within the confines of what God has made, everything's going to work out. Um,
Yeah.
the issue with feminism and stuff back in those days, there were legitimate things that they like. Obviously, nobody is in support of uh, some of the things that were going on back then. However, I hate the arguments that people bring up, like, "Oh, well, women didn't have the right to vote until whatever." Well, neither did most men, and I'm not talking about black men. I'm talking about most men of all races back then didn't have the right to vote. The reason why is because there was factors that came into play to be a voter. You had to be a landowner, right, and you had to be eligible for the draft. Well, somehow they escaped both of those. So you can't sit here and tell me that there hasn't been progress on their side of things that is highly favored towards them. Um, and so that's one thing behind the red pill that I can get behind. However, I don't agree with some of the things that they talk about how we should treat women. It's very, I hate the word misogynistic because it's such a buzzword nowadays. But here they are, they'll tell men, uh, you need to work out, you need to have money, you need to look good, blah blah blah, and sleep with a bunch of women. But then they'll go and
Yeah.
call those women every name under the book and degrade them for having high body counts. Well, you're causing that problem. You are just as bad as they are. And that's a huge problem I'm having. And the reason why it's like that is because whenever you look in at the world is full of nothing but sin. It's dark and it's always going to contradict itself because it can't go off of a moral standard. If it's not
Yeah.
abiding by God's word, it's going to contradict itself.
And I don't think I'd throw the word misogynistic. I would use the word disordered, right?
There you
Because
go. Yeah.
it's a response to problems, okay? Because feminism, the new wave has brought in all sorts of problems with marriage and relationships, which is the key fundamental. Uh, if society was an organism, relationships and families, the individual cells, right? So we're being attacked at the fundamental unit of human life, which is the family, and relationships between men and women. So it's like, and there is like the divorce courts right now are brutal. You know what I mean? It's like you can be a guy, you've done nothing wrong, and you could lose your money and you could lose your kids just like that. So, naturally, it's like, yeah, it is a bit of a minefield right now. You do have to be careful. However, it's like they're throwing the baby out with the bathwater. It's like now we're attacking marriage as an institution. It's like we have to remember marriage was instituted by God. And from the Catholic perspective, is a sacrament that has been given to us by God. It is the way for men and women to exist, especially uh, yeah, for the creation of family, for having kids. So it's like that is a fundamental part of human life. And to reject it because we have problems is foolish. And it's only going to make the problems way worse. So it's like, Yeah, currently in modern society. And I don't recommend that, you know, ultimately I think a lot of the problems with marriage is that we've separated God from marriage. When we have the religious framework, the Christian framework, we've seen throughout history tons of successful marriages. Not even, like within the last generations, like we can think of our grandparents. Most of our grandparents had healthy marriages and lived good lives. So the problem isn't with marriage itself, it's something else, right?
Yes.
So instead of attacking marriage, which was instituted by God, we should be seeking to revive it from its in exercise it in the way that God intended, and not the way that society has been uh, has turned it into, right? Which essentially marriage these days, to most people, it's just like just it's become much more meaningless. Like, oh, marriage has just become like you've been dating for someone long enough so you can have this nice wedding and oh wow, look at us, we're married. But in reality, it's much deeper than that, uh, which is important to note. So yeah, and I think something worth talking about as well is like some of the claims. So like the red pill points out a lot of correct problems. It kind of, it does give you a pretty decent framework for understanding like how women operate in relationships to a certain extent. However, they often take it to extremes and they tend to generalize to a degree that is unwise in terms of how they describe uh, like what's going on. So yeah, so like for example, I've heard some red pill guys, this isn't all of them, but a lot of them, uh, it's like they'll make a lot of, they refer to evolution to biological claims to then make behavior like, okay, so because this is natural to us, then that means that we should live in this way, right? So men have a naturally high sex drive, right? Therefore, we should be able to sleep around at will, and it's completely natural. And quite frankly, it's like obviously it's not natural, right? The way that we're living in the modern world, first off, is like it's natural for us to procreate, to have children, right? But that's not what we're doing.
Right.
Uh, we're having like we're pushing men to have non-reproductive sex with as many women as they possibly can. That's not natural. Okay.
No. Yeah.
The purpose of sex is to have children, right? To form offspring. And what do children need? They need a father. So this whole idea that it's natural for us to be just going around, sleeping around, it's not. It's very it's negative psychologically for men and women. For men, it becomes an addiction of just trying to, the dopamine cycle of chasing these women and being successful, and you feel good about yourself. And for women, it's especially damaging. And we know this, and the red pill knows this themselves. Why? Because they'll tell you to stay away from women with high body counts. They're like, don't get into relationships with chicks that have high body counts. And but as a man, it's like it's perfectly fine because it's natural for us to want to sleep around, and it's a sign of high status, right? Because if a guy's sleeping around, it's usually because there's something, special about them. There's something attractive about them. Whereas for a woman, any woman can sleep around. Therefore, it's bad for women and it's good for men because it's a sign of success. However, it's like if it's bad for women, if we make that claim, which I agree with, right? However, I agree that it's also bad for men as well. It's not good for either of us to do it. But if we're pushing this idea that it's we should avoid hoes, which honestly we should, but we should keep sleeping around. You're, I mean, quite right there is like we're just adding to the problem. We're just
Right.
creating more hoes. And you can feel like, oh, well, I'm just operating through my masculine imperative, yet you're causing damage to modern women. You're ruining them for future men. And as men, look, here's the thing is like we can complain about feminism as much as we want, but ultimately we are responsible, right? Men were ordained by God as leaders in society. Therefore, we should be shepherding. We should be a part of the positive, revolution of creating good in the world. we're the only ones that can change it. You know, it's like, yes, we've feminism has done so much damage, and a lot of men subscribe to it, and a lot of women are completely brainwashed by a lot of these ideals. However, just because that's happening doesn't mean that we morally are okay to just take advantage of that situation.
Right.
So it's, and if we are talking about morality at all, if you have any belief in God and you have any, inclination, it's like very simple moral claim. It's wrong to do harm to other people. If you subscribe to this idea that it's wrong for women to be sleeping around, yet you're actively taking part in it, then you're actively taking part in immorality and you're furthering the problem.
Yep.
Okay. So
It's
it's contradictory.
yes. Well, it's very hypocritical, and you know, if there's one thing that, like, we know the things that God says He hates. He hates when people are hypocritical. Hates it whenever it
Yeah.
comes to the things of Him. Uh, I think another problem that I'm seeing with this whole red pill thing is, although that although this community has kind of become its own community, it's not unique in the sense of what they believe,
Yeah.
because just about all of society agrees with a lot of things that they subscribe to, especially the guys, without even realizing it.
Mm.
And what I'm seeing is, and we talked about in another one of our prior episodes, the hypersexualization of society. That's all it's about. No matter movie you watch, whatever show you watch, whatever music you listen to, all it's talking about is drugs, alcohol, and fornication. That's it. Movies, you can't hardly go watch a movie with your family anymore without some type of sex scene, or they're living together outside of marriage. And you know what? I'm gonna close that whole thing right now. I don't give a rip what excuse you give for cohabitation. It's a sin. You can't sit here and tell me that you're just living with your boyfriend or girlfriend and you guys aren't doing anything. The Bible talks about cohabitation, and guess what? God calls it sinful. So don't give me all these excuses. I'm tired of all the excuses. You don't know my lived experience and blah blah blah. When you get to the pearly gates and you walk up to God for judgment, he's not going to give a rip about what your lived experience is. What he's going to care about is, who's Jesus to you, and uh, are you right with him? That's it. So we'll get back on track though. What I'm seeing is I'm seeing a move into the church with some of this stuff. Not directly from like pastors or anything, but a lot of these young men and women who are growing up in the churches today. Do they go to the Bible studies for their youth stuff? Yeah, some of them do. Do they go to church? Yeah, some of them do. But where are we leading them? What is happening? Because they're going to go out into the world, and we are sending them out into the world very underprepared, to take on the things of this world. Whenever we're raising up children in the church, we should be raising them to become warriors for God. And we're sending them out with the same Bible stories about Noah, which a whole other topic. Most people don't actually know what actually went on there. They just think that people were just bad, so God flooded the planet. Um, there's a whole bunch of stuff, and we just talk about the same things over and over, but we don't address the real world issues that they are going to face. So they go out, they see it, they don't know how to combat it, so they just become a part of it. And it's very upsetting, because was I brought up seeing these things and I still fell into it? Yes. So what does that mean for the person who's not being ministered to and not being trained up in how they should go, and they go out into it? They're gonna they're it's not gonna work.
Yeah.
And it's something that's creeping into the church, because more and more I'm seeing people who I've known, uh, who grew up in church, and They're living together with their boyfriend or girlfriend. They're not getting married. They've got
Yeah.
kids now, um, and all kinds of different things. But yet they're there on Sunday morning, hands up, crying, all these different things, and then they'll go back to living their sinful lifestyle right after service ends. That's a sign. That's a sign that there's issues in that church with the Spirit moving, but that clearly shows that the Holy Spirit is not working in that person because there's no conviction of the sin that they're doing. And that's we need to get back to bold men of God and women of God, but bold men of God who are going out and combating this garbage because it is just an absolute just cancer on all the things that God has afforded us to in this country. I mean, He has blessed this country. I mean, do I the founding fathers were they Christians? No, a lot of them were deists. Um, however, there was a unified belief that there was a creator, and the ones who were Christians specifically tied that into the Constitution. And ever since then, God has blessed this country, and I don't give a rip what anybody says. This is and always will be a Christian nation, but we're letting it fall, and it's really upsetting.
And look, Western civilization was built through Christian principles,
Yes.
right? And we could see the greatness of Western civilization. A lot of it was tied up with Christianity, a lot of the values, the things that we take for granted today. And, today, all you hear is people complaining about, oh, Christianity just created this world where there was so much oppression and whatnot. Yet we don't realize the very idea of human rights. You know what I mean? Like a lot of this stemmed through Christian thought, this idea of equality, these
Who
beautiful things.
said you have rights? You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
what is
Who
right? A lot
says?
of it
You know?
philosophically is based on Christian principles and the belief in God. And I
Yeah.
think something else too is very easy these days to fall into despair because we look around and shit's messed up and it's depressing and it's kind of sad. Like you have all these people walking around and it's like, what's the point of this? Like we have all of these things, yet we all are depressed and life sucks. You just work your job, you come home, and then you die. Um, and I think we need to have a future mindset because realistically, man, like a lot of these problems are not going to be fixed in our lifetime. However,
Yeah.
if we want to build the framework, we can, and we're seeing it now. I think a lot of people, the younger generation, are starting to revert back to their roots. Christianity as a whole is growing in popularity, and people are starting to see the problems with modernism. And this is the funny part too, is like a lot of modernists, like feminists, liberals, they're like, we need more of that, and we'll be happy. It's like we're doing it right now, and life sucks for most people, right? Like you look around, it's like relationships aren't working. Marriages, what they fail at like 50% rate. Depression, anxiety, mental disorders are all on the rise, and in general. So it's like this, the way that we're modern thinking is not working. It's not sufficient towards thrive for humanity to thrive. So it's like there's something else there. Okay. And I think a lot of people are starting to tune into it, right? Which is God, because God created us. And when we live a life that's rooted in our own pleasure, it ultimately leads to destruction. When everyone becomes focused on themselves and their own, personal success and happiness, people become miserable because that's not what life is all about.
Right.
So I think we need to have a future mindset of building, things might get worse, but just because they might get worse doesn't mean that we just give up. It's like we need to build the framework for the future. We've let uh, we've been doing this experiment, this modern experiment in this secular society. It's not turning out super well. It's time to stand up, start fighting back against it, and hopefully we can set set the framework so that in the future things get a little bit less fucked up. Ultimately, right? That's the goal. Uh, or you can just, be a degenerate, uh, and just try and enjoy the world. You can adopt the red pill lens to its entirety, and you can try and find happiness through that. And I'll tell you what, you probably won't, right? And that's the other part. I think it's important to mention, like with the red pill. You hear a lot of advice out there. I think one that needs to be talked about more is like this whole idea that as a man, right, you reach your prime in your 30s, like your
Yeah,
mid 30s, your late 30s. So you shouldn't even think about settling down for a long-term relationship until then. I think that's terrible advice. I don't
it's
know
a stupid.
about you, Justin, but dude, here's the reality. Okay. So, okay. Theoretically, if you like these red pill creators, some of the biggest ones, you think about Fresh and Fit, you think about Andrew Tate. Okay. These guys who look, they're successful.
They come under
They're,
nothing but they come under nothing but scrutiny all the time. And it's
I
like
mean,
like
yeah, I mean, I think it's funny. Like a lot of it, you got to give them that, dude. Like it's funny to watch them, you know, uh, debate these OnlyFans chicks and whatever. Like, and they do think that they're standing up for masculinity, but they're standing up
yes.
for a disordered version of it. And it's
Yes.
like we need to bring everyone back to a more ordered version of where we're actually creating good in the world, and we're not just adding to the dysfunction. As funny as it is to watch and listen to, it's like it's not ideal, guys. But
Right.
yeah, like this idea, like that in your 30s, your early 40s, you're just gonna have all this access to women and whatnot. Maybe for 5% of dudes that when they're in their 30s, they're still attractive, they become very successful and whatnot. Yeah, those guys, of course, the world is their oyster. But for most guys in your early 30s, whatnot, right? You're going to be less attractive. You're going to be working a normal ass job. And you're going to have way less access to the social environment that you did in your early 20s, your late teens, when you were around a lot of young women, a lot of people who were looking for relationships and whatnot. And when you're in your 30s, I guess you could, like this whole idea that, uh, you sleep around in your 20s, like as if that does no damage to you, right?
Yeah.
Like you don't get it out of your system, you get it into your system. So you just become this like sex addict, you're just sleeping with a bunch of women. Then in your 30s, you're finally like, you know what? I'm gonna settle down and find that nice virgin Christian girl. As if she wants you, bro.
Yeah, she don't want you. She don't
Yeah, as if
want
she
you.
wants. And
Like,
I have personal experience with this because the funny thing is most of these guys that are preaching this whole idea, none of them are doing it. Almost none of them are in that, long-term relationship. Almost none of them have kids or are doing any of this. They think that in their 30s they're going to find this virgin who wants to be with them. Dude, personal story time. All right.
uh-oh.
That's what I wanted too. Like I was like, all right, I'm 24, I've slept around with a bunch of women. I met this girl and she was a virgin. And you know what? It bothered the fuck out of her that I had been with all of these women, right? Because women do not naturally, like if only this was the case, but most women don't like the idea of their guys sleeping around with a bunch of other women in the same way that a guy doesn't like the idea of a woman doing that. Now it
Yep.
could be different, right? Because they're attracted to you. So like you know, you're a guy that can get women, so you are attractive. So you do attract this woman. Doesn't mean that they like that you've done this and that it won't create problems. And it did for me. It created substantial problems in that relationship, a lot of insecurity. And ultimately, it didn't work out because I didn't do enough work on myself. Like I didn't actually, become a virtuous guy. So, so yeah, like this whole idea, wait till your 30s, bro. Oh, wait till your 30s when you're working your job. Most guys are not going to become ultra successful. And we're talking about the bell curve. Most guys are going to be in the middle. They're dating most young women that are in their early mid 20s. Realistically, you might be able to get them, but most women don't want a guy that's 10 years older than them. It does happen. You're more likely as a guy to be able to get a chick that's a lot younger than you than a woman is. It's more socially acceptable. It happens. But just because can happen doesn't mean that that's what you should be banking on, uh, because it probably isn't going to happen. Realistically, you're in your 30s, and most of the chicks around you are going to have kids already. The women that were, worth marriage are already married, etc. And unless you have some kind of massive turnaround where you become a virtuous man, you're probably not going to find what you're looking for. The best time, and how do I know this, is because, I go to a Catholic church and I see all kinds of young couples who are married and who have a lot of children. And the vast majority of them got married when they were younger, in their early 20s, in their mid 20s, some of them in their late teens. Like we know a guy, good old, Jonah. Uh,
Yeah,
yeah, he has 3 kids now. He's in his early 20s and he has a good marriage. And I know a lot of people like that. And that is the
yeah,
traditional framework that has worked for most of human history.
yes,
And it's still true, even though it's harder now. Yeah, it's like you're not gonna, I'm not telling guys to find the local sorority girl and just get married to her. It's like, no, it's like a lot of the problems with marriage come because we're doing it in a secular way.
yeah,
The successful marriages, the successful relationships, you see a lot of them in the Christian churches, in in Catholicism. It's still out there. It still exists, guys. But of course, you're not seeing it on your local college campus at the fucking frat party. Yeah,
yeah,
there it's all fucked up. But you go and you look over here and you see that it's still an attainable thing, even in 2025.
yeah. Well, we talk like their points on feminism today are very true for the most part. But what they don't realize is that they're like, I don't know what you call the male version of a feminist is,
Yeah.
but like that's what they are, manimist, I guess. That's what they are.
Meninist.
They're crazy just like the other side is. And
Hmm.
they're spitting the same exact stuff just from the man's side. It's literally no different. And what you see is here they do all this talking about you need to be a man, you need to do this, you need to do that. Well, whenever we look at psychology and we look at the attributes between a man and a woman. Oh, by the way, scripture, which talks about these things as well, that book that was written thousands of years ago that nobody believes, but yet proves everything and disproves all of the stupid nonsense today. Anyways,
Yeah.
that book, the Word of God, talks about how men and women are different. That doesn't mean that they're not equal, it just means that they have different roles. And it talks about women being the weaker vessel, which means basically that they are more emotionally driven, where men are more logically driven. That doesn't mean that women can't be logical, and that doesn't mean that men can't be emotional. It just means that one of those two have to take over, and men tend to lead more or lean more towards the rational than the women who lean more towards the emotional. Here's the deal: these men that they call themselves are doing everything out of emotion. Everything it's basically a bunch of spoiled brats who have decided that because they got hurt at one point that they were going to take it all out on the women. So they want
Well,
to get they want to get rich, they want to get the fame, they want to sleep around with all a bunch of women, and then they throw fits whenever people call them out on it. And what that shows is that shows men. I'm not saying that men have to be insecure. They have to be secure in every single thing, every single aspect about their life. Everybody's got insecurities about something. What I am saying is that the things that they're doing, they're acting completely out of the here and the now, the emotion behind everything. And that's a feminine trait. And they'll sit here and they'll tell you, oh, well, you're not a man unless you're doing this. Okay, well, I could also say, you're telling me that you're more of a man than the guys that live, in the 40s who had jobs, who had families, went off to war, uh, did all different kinds of crazy stuff. And those guys never lived the same values that you did. And you
mm,
want to talk about the feminism side of things, they didn't treat women like they were garbage. If they saw how guys like them were treating women, they go up and slap them around for it.
yeah.
So
Because,
what?
dude, that's someone's daughter. You know what I
Yes,
mean? Think about it. If you're a father and that's your daughter, would you be
yeah,
wanting guys to be treating them like that?
right. And
You know
that's
what I
the
mean?
difference
Just
between their view and the Christian worldview, is because the Christian world, in their worldview, that woman is just a slab of meat for them to go do whatever they want with. But in the Christian worldview, we say men and women both have value that is given from God, and we should treat them as such. My wife, okay, my beautiful wife, I love her so much. I was not living right whenever I was in the army. She was not, living right whenever obviously we weren't together, but she had her own stuff. Everybody's got their own story. But when we met, she was in her journey uh, with Christ. I was in my journey, and God brought us together. And one of the things I told her was, I said, I want to make sure that I treat you how God expects me to treat one of his daughters. Because me as a Christian, I'm a son of God, and her as a Christian, she's a daughter of God. And I better treat her right. You know what I mean? And that's how the Christian worldview looks at these things. And that's why we show that love, that respect. You can't experience those things to the fullness without God. And that's why he talked about how they believe that women or men in their 30s or whatever meet their full potential. Well, as you said before, that's the man side of things, but women on the other side of things say the same exact thing. Well, women don't reach their full peak until this time, and that during that time you should be going out, you should be working. Don't worry about a family. Don't worry about all these
yeah.
things. That's the same exact thing that these red pill people are saying. And what happens is they reach their mid 30s or their 40s, they don't have a family, they don't have a wife, and now nobody wants them because they've slept around with all different kinds of people. They've carried so much trauma from that stuff. And I hate once again, I hate the word trauma because it's such a
No,
buzzword nowadays.
I think it's a good word in this situation.
Yeah. But that's what it is, because how God originally designed marriage was to be the original design, there was no paperwork involved in the original design. The consummation of marriage, meaning that the you guys were married, was sex. And it was a binding together. Boom, you guys have now become one flesh. But because of the stubbornness of people and the sinful people back in the Old Testament, Moses had to write this law, or this document of marriage that we know about because there was a document of divorce. And he had to do that because people were going and sleeping with people, and they'd say, "That's not my wife. I don't know what you're talking about." And so that way they could go sleep around with a whole bunch of people. So because of people's stubbornness and not wanting to live inside God's order, this document had to be written up to show that they were married. Nowadays, marriage has become outside of what God has called marriage to be. When
Yeah.
you take vows when you get married, yes, you're doing those vows to the other person. I get that. But you're actually doing it to God. And when you break those vows, you're telling God, I've broken this covenant. So what's the punishment supposed to be? Because there's a punishment when a covenant is broken. And so whenever you go through life and you're doing nothing but just sleeping around with a bunch of people, making all these covenants, what's the punishment going to be? It's going to be the baggage that you bring into your next relationship. Now that doesn't mean that God's grace is not sufficient. God will forgive you for those things. But at the same time, that kind of becomes that thorn in the side. And
Yeah.
just
Absolutely.
about every man and every woman in this society has to deal with that baggage. But the thing is that the more you dive into it, the more baggage that you're bringing on. It's like accumulating debt.
Mm.
If you think about it, whenever you accumulate debt before you get married, and then you go get married, now that person takes on your debt too. So that's what I'm saying. This whole entire thing of just go around and sleep with however many women you want. Women go around and sleep with however many men you want from their side of things. No, this is a bad thing for society. This is a terrible
It's,
thing.
and it's just we're feeding the problem. We're just
Yeah.
making the problem even worse. We're just setting the next generations up for more and more failure when we buy into this. And I think like with feminism, similarly to red pill, is it speaks to the naturally, like I would say, sinful side of both women and men, because it tells you that you could have your cake and you can eat it too. So it's, like as a guy, red pill, of course, it's very appealing because it's like, yeah, you as a guy, uh, yeah, you can build yourself up and you can take advantage of as much as you want, right, in the world of sleeping around, and you could have the women. And even then, at the end of the day, if you still want the relationship, you could still do that, and you'll be even more successful because now you've built up that knowledge base so that you know how women operate and whatnot. So it speaks to that side of us that is you know that we naturally want to fall into as a guy, but is ultimately uh, not not the way that God designed us to live, and creates all kinds of problems, right? Like we're listening to these gurus who have a lot of money and they're rich, and maybe they do live these lives that are full of pleasure, and maybe they're happy. But when you give that advice to the common guy, what you get is way more destruction. And same with the common women, right? Like we have these figures that have come up in both feminism, in both like this kind of red pill ideology, who rise and everyone wants to be like them. The truth is, at the basic level, most people are not going to be that, and you're just going to be scorned and bitter, and you're going to have to eat the real consequences, and even them are most likely in their lives going to end up facing the consequences. It'll be interesting to see these guys, like we've lived in this era, when they get older in their 60s and 70s, kind of what their worldview develops into, because I bet at a certain point they're going to start to realize, okay, this has been pretty fruitless. Like,
Yes.
what have I actually done? What good has actually come out of this? Or maybe not. Maybe they'll just continue on. Uh, but yeah, for the average dude, like, look, it says way more about you if you have the ability. So you have like different groups of guys, right? You have the guys that can sleep around and do, and then you have a larger majority of guys that want to, but they can't. It's way more impressive is being the guy that can. Like you've developed yourself as a man to where you're a good man, you're virtuous, you're attractive, and you could do that, but then you don't because you have self-discipline and you've built virtue to where, you will good of the other people. Like, and ultimately that's what this is all about. It's like, how can we expect women in society to change if we're not leading them towards the good? We're leading them towards the bad, because that's what we do when we adopt this kind of, I would say, selfish, enjoy the decline mindset of like, okay, well, shit's fucked up, so I'm just going to sleep around and, you know, whatever. Uh, but, but yeah, it's ultimately it leads to destruction, and it did in my own life, and it does to a lot of guys' life, right? Uh,
Absolutely.
because it doesn't set you up for success. Because ultimately, I think deep down, the vast majority of people want a fulfilling relationship, right? We naturally crave that. God gave that to us, right? We also naturally crave sleeping around and whatnot. Uh, However, the fruits of those lifestyles are very differently, you know. They indeed. So it's like we naturally we crave that. So it's like because it is the best, for the vast majority of people, it's the healthiest way to live because you can actually live a fulfilling life. Whereas the other one, it's just a hedonistic treadmill of constantly chasing the validation, being on the chase. Uh, and it usually ends up just causing a lot of dysfunction.
Yeah. Well, I none of this should be a surprise. Well, it's not a surprise to the Christian because we know that this one for one, things like this have been problems throughout all of history. Um, just about every ruling society has had problems with. You notice that everything goes back to sexual promiscuity. Everything.
Yeah.
There's such a problem with that, which that's a topic for another time. But um, we should not be surprised by this because we know that this stuff is going to happen. I'm looking at Second Timothy chapter 3 here, and I go to this on just about everything. And the reason why is because Timothy here is talking about stuff that is going to happen in the last days. Now, this episode's not about eschatology, okay? But I think it's important to know for those who may be new to the faith or are in it now and don't know. Whenever we talk about eschatology, that's the study of the end times. The the end times. So the the we are in the end times right now. But whenever we talk about the last days, we're talking about the last days of the last days. This stuff all started whenever Christ resurrected. Boom. Now we're in the end times. Okay. Uh, but whenever we're talking about the last days, sorry, we're in the last days. But the end times being the last days of the last days. And in Second Timothy 3, I'm going to read just a short portion of this. It says, we're going to start at verse 1. This know also that in the last days perilous times shall come. For men shall be lovers of their own selves, covetous, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, without natural affection. I encourage you to go and look up what that actually means, because that's not just talking about um, being sexually promiscuous or whatever, promiscuous. That's also talking about the problems that we're seeing with the LGBT community. Truce breakers, false accusers, incontent, fierce, despisers of those that are good. We see all that right now. Traitors, heady, high minded, lovers of pleasure more than lovers of God. And we're going to go look at verse 5 here, but at the verse 4 there, lovers of pleasure more than lovers of God. They place their pleasure in this life, the things of this world, over the obedience of God. And the God that it's talking about is the one and only God, because it's capitalized here. So they're talking about how even those that are in the church would put pleasure above God. Verse 5, it says, having a form of godliness, but denying the power thereof. And it tells us, from such turn away. These people, there are people in the red pill community who claim to be godly people. There are people who are out in the world who come up with all these different theories about stuff that's going on and how we should act as a society. And they'll claim to be followers of God, but everything that they do is in complete contradiction and opposition to what God says. In society today, we are dealing with things that the Bible explicitly says we were going to deal with on an elevated scale. And it talked about it happening towards the end. Um, I I got to be 100% honest with you. More and more, and if you're not a Christian right now, obviously I would tell you you need to really. Um, I'm glad that you found this podcast, because everything that we talk about on here, we want to tie into Scripture, but we don't want to shy away from the problems that are facing us in the world today. So,
Indeed. And it's more like, because things are dysfunctional, it doesn't mean that we should simply take part in the dysfunction. We should
yes,
stand up against it. And there's a lot of problems that are going on right now. And the harder thing to do is try and be uh, the example, to do the hard thing, which is to be disciplined and to be virtuous. And the modern world is a minefield, and it's difficult. And people will say, "Oh, you're setting yourself up for failure." It's like society's built against you. Don't get married because divorce can happen. Your life can be ruined. And it's like, yeah, there's risks. There's risks to doing the good thing, but ultimately, we should. Ultimately, God has a plan for us, and He's with us, and He guides us along this. And instead of giving in to the world, we should submit to God, and He will take care of us on these paths.
Is it in scripture it says that God opposes the proud, right? So
Yeah,
he brings them down. Like they'll elevate themselves, or he may they some of these people, like I just read through Second Timothy here. Some of these people may have started out on this, and I do think that this started out as a they tried to do a good thing. Um,
yeah,
but just like with anything else, if God's not in it, it's going to fall every time. And essentially, in Second Timothy 3, this speaks true to that passage of scripture. It talks about um, being lovers of pleasure more than lovers of God. If you're a lover of pleasure more than you are a lover of God, you can't serve two masters. So you're gonna yield to one. And then it goes on to say, having a form of godliness, but denying the power thereof. And that's what I've noticed with a lot of the people that really started out the whole red pill thing. A lot of them were secular, but there were some who were at least claiming to be Christians, and
yeah,
they started into this trying to bring that worldview uh into the red pill stuff to try and wake people up. The problem is that they had a form of godliness, but denied God's power. They didn't hold the scripture. They didn't hold to what God's true intentions behind everything that we see in scripture is for the world. And in the end, this whole thing has come crashing down on a lot of them. I mean, there's stuff. I mean, you saw the whole thing that happened with Andrew Tate, um, where he got arrested and everything. They claimed that he was trafficking people in another
yeah.
country.
I don't know how much
Uh,
of that is true, how much of
yeah,
that is just them attacking him, but you know,
yeah,
certainly Andrew Tate is no pillar of morality and of ways to operate. You know what I mean?
yes, yes,
So, but the
yeah,
and and that's the thing is like most of us, it's like if you do so like the red pill as an ideology, right? Like in and of itself isn't necessarily like some of the things that they say, some of the claims and whatnot are not necessarily bad. It's what has come out of it. It's like what people have used it for. And in general, what have we seen? Is we've seen it used essentially as a marketing strategy for figures to bring men in to sell their product, right? Which is their ideology, their advice, their coaching. And it's really like, what do a lot of young men want? They want to get laid. So where do they go? They go online, they start listening to these dudes. And honestly, like a lot of it works. Like it does work, you know. Uh, but just because something works doesn't mean that it's moral, or just because something may accurately describe a situation does not mean that we need to operate in that way or that we should. And we ought to do like a whole podcast on backstory, but like I guess I'll share a little bit how, I came out of that mindset, right? Because I was fully into it, and I was like starting to go relatively extreme, like yeah, it's my, as a man, I want to have access to women, and like me sleeping around is not a big deal, but it's bad for women to do it because I'm just, you know, doing my natural part. And maybe some red pill would say that I'm twisting what they say, like that's not actually what they preach. However, I think this still is common amongst people who hold to the ideology. And that's what I was doing. Now the thing is like, was there what did I get out of it? What I got out of it is, like Justin was saying earlier, a thorn in your side, an addiction. It's just that dopamine cycle of constantly doing this. and you get into relationships with good women, and you end up, you don't treat them as you should because once again, they're human, created in God's image, right? And we should seek to protect them, not extract value out of them, like for our own benefit. And that's kind of what I was doing. And the consequences of sleeping around are many. Like human society is not designed to be like that. We're not like animals, okay? Let's debunk that real quick, right? Like if we were meant to sleep around, one is like, as I was saying earlier, the purpose of sex is procreation. And we all know that children are best suited when they have two parents in the household. There's research, there's studies, right? So if we're having sex and we're not doing
And
that, go
a
ahead.
male and female parent. They're
Yeah, male and female
biological
parent.
parents.
Yeah.
Yes.
Indeed. So it's like when we're sleeping around and we're not even fulfilling our biological imperative because we're not having children. We're just having, you know, uh, meaning like it's just pleasure at this point. So we're twisting what the original purpose of sex is even for. And then besides that, what else do we get? What do you see? And when people sleep around a lot, you see STDs.
Yeah.
If humans were meant to just, fuck whoever they wanted, how come we get a disease that thankfully due to modern science, doesn't cripple our lives anymore with antibiotics and whatnot, uh, but many people back in the day, syphilis was huge and killed a lot of people and made a lot of people go crazy, and gonorrhea and chlamydia. Like imagine, like you couldn't operate, like this is not naturally how humans operate because there's consequences to it. And yeah, so it's like it is not like what is one thing you see in common across all societies is you see almost every society has some form of marriage, and almost all of them hold, consider promiscuity to be bad. Of course, some cultures consider it to be worse among women than among men, but even then, it's like no society operates on the rule of like just sleep around and whatnot. And and I face some of those consequences. Like this is embarrassing to admit, and but something you need to know is like, yeah, STDs are real and some of them can go away with some antibiotics and some of them don't. And I learned that the hard way, because I got herpes.
Nah,
It's
nah,
quite
but
embarrassing, but it's true. And so like, and that's just one of the small consequences because to all the people out there that may have gotten herpes, it does when you first get it, it feels like the end of the world. It's not the end of the world, but it is a sign that we were engaging in behaviors that we shouldn't. Okay.
yeah.
And that's how I took it. And that was kind of like the wake up call of like, okay, I need to stop living like this. Um, so so yeah, it's like human beings, we're not designed to operate like this. There's massive societal consequences. And like, yeah, we may enjoy it. You may be lucky. You may never get an STD. You may never get a chick pregnant, whatnot. Uh, but what you have done is like psychologically, like in your own mind, you've become addicted to this way of operating. And inherently with the red pill lens, it's like, yeah, we agree it's bad to sleep around. It's like for women, like you don't want to date horse, and you're just creating more of these women who are scorned and bitter, which then just feeds into this cycle of dysfunction. So
Yeah.
this idea that you can have your cake and you can eat it too, and there's no consequences, maybe for some, but for most, you're going to get a wake up call and
What's
you're going to
what's oh sorry.
go ahead.
I was just gonna ask, what do you by chance know what red pill's view on abortion is?
That's a good question. I don't think they have like a official view within
Right.
the ideology. It's more individual.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
individual, but
I was gonna say because well,
I
it
guarantee
seems.
it, a
Oh,
lot
sorry.
of abortions are happening
Yeah.
from red pill dudes.
Yeah. Well, I was just gonna say it's like they're feeding into it, and it's like it amazes me that we've come to the point in society because even if we were animals, which we're not, okay, very clearly at the fall, like before the fall, God gave man dominion. Okay, so we were in charge of His creation. It was our job was to take care of His creation. When we fell, it was because we were trying to become like the creation. And in the consequence of it, we became a slave to it.
Yeah.
But through Christ, we're restored back to having dominion over the creation. Now, here's the thing. Here's the thing. Even if we were animals, even if we were just a bunch of really good looking monkeys, okay, running around,
Yeah.
even animals don't do that stuff. Animals only fornicate or whatever you want to call it. They only have coitus whenever, I love that word. It's so funny. But they they only they only do that act whenever it's mating time. That's the only time they do it.
Yeah.
So even animals don't just run around and just sleep around without the purpose of procreation. So you're acting worse than an animal at that point, worse than an animal, and it's gotten so bad in our society that now people are like, I don't know how I got pregnant. What are you talking about? It only
Yeah, like we're
happens one
surprised all of a
way.
sudden.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it only happens one way. Do we need to go back to the video in fifth grade? Like when a man and a woman love each other, like it's not that it's not this is a this is the problem. We've distorted what marriage is and what this act is supposed to be. This is a beautiful thing that God created. And we've distorted it so much in society that now people are like, I don't know how I got pregnant. It's an unexpected thing that just it what? What did you think was gonna happen? What did you think was gonna happen? And then it comes to the point, like we talked about with the red pill stuff, they'll go out and sleep with tons of women, get them pregnant and run off. That's a real
Yeah.
man for you. But then women will go abort the child because they don't want to take responsibility either. So both side isn't taking any responsibility because the
Yeah.
woman will say, well, what about college? What about my career? What about my freedoms? Well, you probably should have thought about that before you started sleeping with this man, right? And this
Dude.
dude,
And yeah, let's talk about like being a man is taking responsibility for your actions and responsibility for the people around you. It's like,
yep,
yeah, we're against feminism and whatnot. Feminism is against the family. It's against the nuclear family. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, so the biggest thing, the biggest middle finger that you can put to modern society is to take responsibility for your actions,
yeah.
take care of the women in your life. And ultimately, men are the only ones who can change this. You know what I mean? Like we're the only
Well,
ones who can put the framework to step up and get shit together.
like the red pill side, that's what I'm saying. Both sides are screaming the same thing, just for men and one for women. Like
Yeah.
the dudes, they don't want to take responsibility, and the women, they don't want to take responsibility, so they're beefing with each other because they're like, "Well, you got
Yeah.
to take responsibility. Well, you got to take responsibility." And we're sitting here as Christians saying, "How about you both take responsibility?" Because
Exactly.
you're a being that was made with free will, and God expects you to take responsibility for your actions. And it's so just mind-boggling that they can sit on either side and not look at the fact that, I made the decision to do this, but and this is their thought process. I made the decision to do this, but it's their fault. Like, what are you talking about? You know?
Yeah. And that's probably the biggest thing or a big point of all of this is it's easy to point the finger, right? Because there is problems, dude. It's like, yeah, women today, like there's a lot of shit going on. Like there's a lot of crazy behavior. There's a lot of, they're fucking over a lot of dudes. A lot of guys are getting fucked over. And we point the finger at them and we go, you, like, look at this problem. It's like, have we forgotten, guys, that we're the man? You know what I'm saying? It's like that we cannot those they might be lost. They may be lost. But in our own lives, we control what's in our sphere, you know? And yeah, and
Well,
because of that, it's our responsibility to create good and not
well,
just
and
put the problem off on other people.
Well, and my growing up, my dad, and this is coming from a Christian home. This is how my dad raised me, and this is how I'm going to raise my kids whenever we have kids. I'm supposed to raise boys to be men, okay? Um, and what I want, and my daughters, I expect them to become ladies, right? But here's the thing: the man, the man of the house, he should be the example of what he wants his boys to be and what he wants his daughters to marry. And the wife should be the example of the lady that he wants his daughters to become and his sons to marry. We don't do that anymore. Instead, everybody's ashamed of nothing and offended by everything and doesn't want to take accountability for any of their actions. So women get on social media, shake their hind ends around, get on OnlyFans, show off their naked body, messing around with a whole bunch of red pill guys. The red pill guys go on and brag about how much coitus they're having and all different kinds of stuff. But then whenever they have kids, all of a sudden their tone changes a little bit.
Oh, yeah, exactly. That's
But it's
the
a little too late because your stuff's all over the internet for everybody to see, you know? And it's just amazing to me. But I think a big point that we need to go back to scripture on. Big point. We talked about how the red pill dudes are over here blaming women for everything. The feminists are over here blaming red pill and all the dudes for everything. Notice there's a lot of finger pointing back and forth. Okay. If you go back to Genesis chapter 3, okay, and we look at the fall, verse 15, the serpent tempts Eve because she stepped out of the headship of man. Man was tempted because he fell under her headship because he didn't stay in God's order. And what happens? They hid from God. Now, first off, that's kind of a weird thing. Where in the world are you going to hide from God? First off. Second of all, not only did they physically hide, but they started hiding behind each other because God comes up and he asks Adam. He comes up and he says, did I not command you not to eat of this stuff? Why'd you do this? And he's like the woman that you that you gave to me. So not only did he blame her, he said the woman that you gave, blamed God too. So he blamed the woman and he blamed God. So God goes to the woman. He goes, what is this that you done? And she goes, well, the serpent did it. The serpent tempted me. And they put it all off on him. So it's the same exact thing that's going on right now. They're blaming each other. They're blaming each other the whole entire time. And at some point, we've got to take responsibility. This is not a new problem. This is a problem that's gone
oh yeah.
all the way back, you know, and it's wild. I don't know. Yeah.
I think you just said it perfectly right now. It's like we're literally going back to Genesis. Like it's always been a problem. It's always been a problem. But what are we going to do about it? That's the question, And it's easy to point the finger. It's easy to complain. It's easy to just go, screw it. I'm just going to, live however I want, take advantage of all the things that are available to me. However, that one is like we just continue being miserable, things continue to suck, or we decide, maybe life isn't about me and my pleasure. Maybe it's something more and it's something greater. And that's what God has laid out for us. Is there something more? There's something greater. And that's what we need to be looking to. The solution to this cannot be found in the in the Reddit posts and in the YouTube videos of people complaining and dunking on OnlyFans models. You know,
Yep.
they the solution is found in returning to God because we've strewn away, we've ran away for so many years. And the real message for men, for myself, for you, for each other, is to stand up and be men of God. You know
Yes.
what I mean? It's
And, yeah.
boom. And because we can complain as much as we want. And God, it's like it's gonna be like the Garden of Eden to Adam, you know? He's gonna be like, oh,
Yeah.
you're trying to just pin all of this off on everyone else. It's like, well, okay, what are we gonna do?
Yeah.
Right? And which is to start being the example, to lead the charge forward, to return to the values of old, to submit to God
Yeah.
as He intended us, as He intended our creation, and to do our damn best. Uh, and we may not win, but there is virtue and there's good, there's glory in trying,
Yes.
right? And do you think of the greatest saints? You think of the apostles who were with Jesus Christ himself, who went to preach the word, and many of them died terrible deaths. They did not get the prize in life. They did not become kings of men with all of their OnlyFans models on their shoulders. Okay? No. They went and they fought the good fight. And look at what they created, man, from that, from a
Yeah.
group of 12 dudes.
Yep.
And look where Christianity is today. There's what, 1.52 billion Christians in this world. You know what I mean? So just because things are hard and the devil may have dominion over the world, over society, the victory is already won. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
let's take part in the victory and not in the defeat. Okay.
Yes.
So, and as Christians, that's the mindset we need to have. And it's time to stop. Like, we've been hiding, we haven't been fighting. It's time to start fighting back. And
Yeah.
we're just a little podcast. And I was thinking to myself, like, should I really be in a podcast? I'm kind of retarded. You know, what if I say something?
Nah.
And I'm sure, it's like we're gonna say things that are wrong and whatnot and that aren't the best. But ultimately, it's like we just need people to try. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because guess what? The people who are even more retarded, they have loud speakers. You know,
Yeah.
They're-
Like they're getting
political.
propped up and everything.
They're, oh yeah, they're yelling, they're leading these charges. So it's like, guys, let's stand up, let's do something about it.
Yeah.
You
We're
know,
what we're doing here is, we're not necessarily calling out anybody in particular. Okay. What we're calling out is the sinful things that are being pushed in society. And if you're partaking in that, then take that as you want.
yeah.
But we stand for the things of God. Okay. I'm sick and tired of sitting back and not doing anything. Is this podcast going to get crazy big? I couldn't give a rip less, to be 100% honest with you. What I care about is I care about even just one person hearing this and saying, that was good. I'm going to go out and do what they're doing. And it doesn't have to be on here. Go tell people at your work about it. Go tell people in your family, your friends, whatever you want to. But the key is that we have a whole bunch of people sitting in the church just stagnant. It's like we glue them to the seat, and they don't want to get up and they don't want to do anything for God. He called us to go out and preach the word to every living creature. That's what he told us to do, and we're not doing it nowadays. So me and Jeremiah, we're that's what we're doing, and
And
and we're
look,
we're
we're not standing up against degeneracy in the way that we should. You know what I mean? And like part of it, like everyone's like, oh, you guys, you're just complaining, you're just whatnot. It's like, no, look at this shit that's going on. It's terrible. It's the path to hell. And ultimately, that's what this is, man. There's a lot
yes,
of paths to hell out there. And the red pill bringing in young men, and that's the ultimate point here is that it's like you're messing with souls. That's the thing. It's like you're not like things are deeper. The consequences are greater than what they seem, originally. It's like you think that you're helping people. And in some sense, you could be helping people because some of it is like good advice. But then what it's being taken and used for is ultimately leading men on a path towards hell. And it's creating way more of the problems that we're trying to fight against. And
yep,
let's not do that, you know?
yep. And
Let's
I pray that everybody who's involved on either side of that stuff, that they wake up and see the truth. I think it's funny if they use the term red pill like it's the Matrix or something like that. And yet they're caught in this whole entire lie. They think they're so just, oh, we figured it out, but yet they're completely blind.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's
Take
like,
the
dude,
real
you're
red
not,
pill.
yeah, you're not saying anything that nobody has ever like. They think that they come along at this point in human history and they've got it all figured out. It's like, bro, what? You know how many more intelligent people have been out here on the planet, way more successful, had like from your point of view, like not yours, but from their point of view, they think success is money, fame, women, looking good. Bro, there's been way more people than you throughout history have had way more than what you've had. They had it figured out, I promise you. But it didn't work for them. But you know what conquered their worldview? I'll tell you. Christianity conquered the Roman Empire. Okay. It conquered the pagans of Europe, all the Viking tribes, all of those different things. It conquered the Muslims whenever the Muslims tried to come in and kill off all the Christians in Europe. Killed them off twice. Okay. Uh this Christianity has done all of that, but not through warfare. Now I know all crusades. Yeah, crusades was a legitimate response to a, an assaulting force. It was a defense. It was now. Am I saying that everything that went on during there was good? No, but I am saying it was a legitimate response. But the majority of Christianity, the majority of the spread of Christianity throughout the world the vast majority has not been by force. It's been through peace. You can't say that about any other religion. You can't say, oh, relationship. You can't say that about any other religion. Okay. So whenever we're looking at this stuff, their worldview was conquered by Christianity, and it's going to happen again. So, um, I'd just say get on board because things are
And
much
hey,
better on this side.
and that's what we need. We need a modern day crusade, not a violent crusade where we go and we literally fight, but a modern day crusade against the evil forces that are incredibly prevalent in all factions of society. And we need individual Christians to step up, pick up their shield, pick up your sword, take part in the crusade. Let's all make a difference, you know? And
Yeah,
all of that starts with ourselves. It's like our individually is doing the things that we know we need to do, standing up against degeneracy and being the example in our own lives so that ultimately we can make a bigger difference in the long haul. Because I think we can. I don't think it's, maybe it's the entire, it's like we don't know exactly what's going to happen, but, things could get better, they could get worse. Pick up your shield and fight.
yep, yep. So,
All right.
well, I think that about wraps it up, brother man. We thank you guys for tuning in and watching. I know
Yep.
that this was probably like, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of red pill or not, but I encourage you to study up on what Scripture has to say on sexual immorality um, before you go looking into red pill stuff. The reason why is because, and if you want to see what a counterfeit is at the bank, they don't teach them to look at the counterfeits. They teach them to look at the originals. That way they know how to spot the counterfeit. So you need to know what the word says. So, Jeremiah, you got any closing thoughts, comments, anything?
Just keep it real, be based. Let's stand up against the degeneracy. A lot of lies out there. A life of pleasure leads to destruction. Life isn't just about pleasure. Uh, there's greater purpose. And that's all I got to say.
All right. We thank you guys for watching. Please, 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 if you stayed this long, hit the like button, subscribe, check that bell notification. That way you're notified when we upload. Also, go check us out on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. And we thank you guys for watching. God bless.